If you're anything like me, you're pretty excited for the launch and the upcoming open and closed beta for Diablo 4, but sadly, I personally haven't been keeping up with the huge changes, and after a bit of research, the changes that I've discovered are pretty amazing stuff. So in this video, I want to go over some of those changes, and depending on how you look at it, they can be good or bad, but at least you should be aware of them. One of the coolest parts of Diablo will have to be the set item system. Not only is this iconic to the point where most modern RPG games use this system, but it really gives players a clear goal when it comes to progression when they're building their character. Unfortunately, at the launch of Diablo 4, there isn't going to be set items, and while that may sound bad, I think it could be good or bad depending on how you look at it. My first Diablo was Diablo 2, and I remember getting some set items on my low level characters, and I remember those items giving me a really good boost to set me up to transition into the mid game. So not having those could be a bit hard on some players who really value those early on. Also, the discovery element of said items is second to none in this genre, and I really love that element. On the flip side, not having set items open up the game to a bit more creativity, with players trying out unique items rather than relying on a set finished build. I do feel like Diablo 3 kind of had this problem where a good portion of the builds are purely based around set items, and not having these set items could be beneficial to some extent. Now, whether you like or dislike the fact that Diablo 4 won't launch with set items, one thing to keep in mind is when the game director Joe Sheely was asked why they were omitted from the launch, he proceeded to say it was a tough choice to launch without them, but they want to make sure that they got it right. And for me, this is much more important than having them at launch. The set items has to be impactful and interesting, and not to mention not be the end-all be-all for all builds. I like the fact in Diablo 3 that you could use unique items as a primary part of your build. So if they get this right, I can definitely see the build diversity being pretty amazing in Diablo 4. For me, I'd rather have a product that works than a product that is rushed. And set items is no exception to this. If you do like what you see here today, do consider subscribing for more Diablo 4 content. And let's get back to the video. While we're on the subject of gear, I want to talk about a change or an addition added to the itemization of Diablo 4. One amazing addition will come with how the gear drops. In Diablo 4, depending on the region you find the gear, the style of that said gear will be unique to that zone. This is one of those things that ARPGs really never took advantage of outside of maybe set or unique items. And let's be honest, fashion is one of the most important parts of online games. If you think about it, it just makes sense for gear to be different based on the region that they drop. If you like a certain look or you want gear to look a certain way, to some extent you could target farm a style of gear. Now, I don't know if Diablo 4 will have a proper transmog system, but even if it doesn't, this is a pretty promising thing for players who enjoy the fashion or RPG element of the game. One thing I think most players hate about ARPGs in general is the inventory management system. It's usually one of the worst parts of the genre, but Diablo 4 is doing something a little bit different. And by different, I mean it's taking inspiration from his other game to make the inventory system a little less annoying. Now, the major change is that every single item drop will only take up one slot rather than multiple slots. If you ever played World of Warcraft, then you're pretty familiar with this system. Every single item, regardless of size, will only take a single slot. In Diablo 2, charms and larger weapons took up huge portions of an already limited inventory space, and even in Diablo 3, things took up 2 slots besides maybe rings and gems. But this change is going to be a massive one for players, as more inventory slots mean more consistent playtime, and for me, there's nothing but positive results from this change. The endgame is getting a bit of a rework in its Paragon system. If you play Diablo 3, then you're pretty familiar with the system, as it gives you infinite power scaling as you level beyond the max. The big difference here is that the Paragon system will be capped now. Every level after 50 will give you an additional 4 levels of Paragon, with a cap of around 200 Paragon points roughly. Unlike Diablo 3, Diablo 4 Paragon system will have a rarity-based node system that has a host of benefits that can range from common, magic, rare, and legendary, with the added passive becoming more and more powerful depending on the rarity of the said node. Now, some of these passives are pretty tame, usually the common ones where you can get stat increases like 5 extra dex or strength or something like that, as to where the legendary ones can give you, for example, 30% increased damage whenever you reach a certain health pool. The major takeaway about the Paragon system is it's going to be significantly different from the Diablo 3 Paragon system, where just getting stats were good, but in this system you're going to actually be able to tailor your character a little bit more. Your choice is going to matter, and if you ask me, having a stat cap like this means that builds are going to be more impactful and you can have a bit more creativity rather than relying on infinite stat scaling for your character to feel good. While we're talking about the leveling and character builds, it'd be smart to mention the huge changes that's happening with the skill tree system. In Diablo 2, you kind of just leveled a skill, you got some marginal gains to that skill, and it just got a little bit better every time you leveled it up. And in Diablo 3, you got access to every skill, but you just, set up a few modifiers to design the skill better suited towards your build. Diablo 4 is taking a bit of a different path from both those systems. You can pick and choose what skills you want to level, but rather than just getting marginal stat gains, you actually get to choose how your skills scale. This system is a bit more robust as it gives player a little bit more control on how the skill fits into their style, and it doesn't just limit it into one linear direction. Now keep in mind that some of the skills are limited. You will have to get a few skills to have access to other skills. So for example, if you want to play the druid as a summoner, you may have to pick some base skills that you're not so interested in, but nonetheless the changes are going to be a little bit more robust, making your character feel a little bit more unique and tailored towards your play style. There is a new Reknown system that has been added to Diablo to further increase the power of your character if you choose to put effort into the system. Some of the rewards are skill points, Paragon points, additional potion charges, and the standard golden experience. Reknown isn't exactly hard to get either, as it is accessible from the world map and it tells you what you need to do to get the Reknown, and so the system is pretty well defined and easy to figure out. The best thing about this system though is that it's shared among all your other characters, so in the event that you decide to roll a new character, you can actually get a bit of an edge on that new character if you decide to make a new one. And if you're anything like me, I'm a little bit indecisive sometimes when it comes to what I want to play, or I like to experiment. This system is going to be pretty amazing for that. The Codex of Power is another massive change that has been added to Diablo 4, and if I'm being honest, it's my favorite change by far. It's pretty much similar to the Kunis Cube from Diablo 3. Rather than having a base passive though for a few slots that give you a boost, you get an effect added to your codex from completing dungeons, and then you get to slot it into a piece of gear. The gear would need to have a matching slot that can house this, and basically you need to run these dungeons in order to attain them. Looking at the codex, there seems to be some pretty powerful modifiers, so this is a pretty massive change. If you're anything like me and you really love making builds, I feel like this is going to be one of those big changes that really can define a character. And with the changes that I mentioned previously, this just adds a whole nother awesome layer to the game's character building. The final thing I wanted to mention was about the Battle Pass. I know those words may worry you a little bit, but there's some cool things I wanted to talk about, and more specifically, I wanted to talk about the free reward track for players who don't purchase the Battle Pass. Essentially, you will get your free XP booster for individual characters that you want to use it on. So if you work a lot or simply want to streamline getting a character as high as possible, then the Battle Pass will have an option for you free of charge. Now while this isn't exactly big in terms of overall gameplay, but if you're anything like me, I work a full-time job, and having a XP boost to, streamline a character is going to be pretty invaluable. And, you just want to get to the end game sometimes, depending on how you like to play the game. And this free Battle Pass system could be beneficial to pretty much any player. I was actually worried a bit about the scope of Diablo 4 when it comes to builds, but after doing some research and getting more information, the more I realized the game actually has some amazing build potential. That's going to be pretty much it for all the things I know now about Diablo 4. I will try to keep you guys updated on any new news that we get as it gets revealed to us. But for now, don't forget to like as well as subscribe for more Diablo 4 content and Diablo 4 builds. And I'll see you guys in the next video very, very soon. Later.